Are you now or are you going to be an executor of an estate? As the executor, you'll likely be tasked with record keeping. If you've not been through the process before, you may not be aware of an upcoming challenge heading your way, and that is the challenge of keeping the records for the estate of the person who has passed away. When a person dies who has heirs, in order for the estate to be distributed to those heirs, you have to provide accurate accounting records to the courts and to the attorneys who are handling the estate. I've been doing bookkeeping for estates for many years and wanted to share with you what I've learned in the hopes that it will help you avoid more suffering. One thing you should know is that because of the extreme difficulty in doing this correctly for somebody who is not trained, it can get very messy and people can get upset. I want to tell you a little bit about one of the cases I've been working on so you can get a sense of where the issues are. I've been working with a lady who tried to use QuickBooks and didn't realize that she had connected her own personal accounts to the estate's bookkeeping records because she had access to the accounts, and when she connected QuickBooks, it said, hey, which accounts do you want to connect? And she just selected them all, and the books were a mess, and it's really difficult to undo, especially with QuickBooks Online, to delete a bunch of things that are in there. It takes a very long time. There were transactions that were written incorrectly, multiple checks, more than one check for the same amount written to the same person, so it was basically duplicated. I caught it. It was over $40,000. There was instances where a check she said was written. I looked. I didn't find the check. She said, yeah, it came out of this account. It went to this person for this reason. I looked. No, that's not what happened. It went out from a different account for a different reason. That's probably not the kind of scenario you want to find yourself in. Whether you're an heir or an executor or an attorney, you really want good records, right? You want to be able to trust what you're looking at. There are some very specific rules about the way accounting is supposed to be done. Things like, what category does this go in? Like if you sell a house and the money goes in the bank account, where do you put that money in the record keeping? Some people try and put it in something like house. That's not really the right category. If you pay money to an auctioneer to sell some of your stuff, but the stuff has already been valued and that value is on the books, the amount you sell it for isn't always going to be the same as the value. In fact, in this case, I saw the value of the internal stuff in the property was, let's say, worth $40,000. They gave it all to an auction house who sold it all and got about $15,000 for it. And after fees, they ended up with about $5,000. Well, the book said $40,000 and we only got $5,000. Do you know what to do with that? This is an example of the kinds of things that could come up for you as the executor, the person trying to do the books. What about just the record keeping in general? Are you supposed to have access to the accounts? Should you be using bill pay? Should you be writing checks? What happens if a check bounces? When do you distribute money to the heirs? How much? Do you have to hold any back? This is another common thing. They do what's called a holdback. So the attorneys will say, well, we'll give the heirs some of the money, but we're going to hold on to some of it because we need to make sure there's enough to cover, things later. So we'll give, let's say, 30% and 30% and 20% and 10%. Well, if you're only distributing a portion of that, you have to take the total and break it all apart by percentages and then distribute that amount to the heirs. And then what's left, you still have to keep track of. And along the way, if you don't have a lot of experience doing this kind of work, I can promise you it gets very messy. So I really encourage you to either get the training you need or hire somebody who can do it right, and do that quickly. Honestly, the best time to do it is right after the paperwork begins. As soon as you can get it started, that's going to be the best, because trying to dig up old records is challenging. Think about the conversations happening in other people's lives who are expecting to receive a distribution from the estate. They're not going to allow poor record keeping to get in the way of them receiving their fair share. So if you're trying to do the record keeping yourself and you're not doing it perfect, you can expect that any anger or frustration spurred by poorly managed record keeping will come to you to handle, and you will at some point be forced to deal with it. The way you deal with it and when you start doing something about it are the key components in determining a successful outcome. At some point after death, an executor will be assigned, and that person is often responsible for the bookkeeping. If there are assets to be sold or distributed, someone will be tasked with keeping records all the way until the last penny is handed out. That might be you. The right way to keep records is according to the rules of the IRS called GAAP. The right way to deal with it is to do things when you can remember what those things were, usually weeks to a few months depending on the transaction, and not wait until many months later or years later when you have more free time. The right way, according to the people who make the rules, is for record keeping to be able to produce sortable ledgers for each account accurately. So what is an account? A bank account is an account, so are credit cards, CDs, lines of credit, but there's others like money that has been distributed to an heir is in an account. The legal expenses, fees related to third parties like secondhand dealers, utilities, maintenance, taxes on real estate, that's an account. Each of these has its own ledger, which is really just a fancy way of saying a list of the transactions in order with details which can be used to sort, summarize, and query along with the other accounts to come up with a complete picture. In order to produce sortable ledgers for each account, you have to use some kind of electronic system. Anybody who tries to do this on paper, if they're not making mistakes, they're taking way too long. These days, electronically is the way to go because of its reliability, its accuracy, the ability for you to sort and query and filter. You can't do that on paper. So usually I know if somebody's doing it on paper, one thing is they can't easily check their work. If it's electronic, you can just, grab a section of numbers and it just tells you what the total is. You can create formulas that also will tell you if anything's off. If you're going to do it electronically, then how do you keep track of all these different things? Most people would probably default to using some kind of spreadsheet like Excel or Google Sheets. That's fine. You can have a column with dates and then the transaction and what the category is and some notes and the amount. And certainly down the road, if you took that spreadsheet, you could total things up and produce results. And that's an okay method. There's nothing wrong with that. And people who, let's say, don't have a lot of accounting experience might do it that way. But if you know how to use accounting software, that's really the way to do it. And the way we do it is by using QuickBooks usually. My mom was a bookkeeper. I remember she started using the early version of QuickBooks way back in the 80s. And I've been using it pretty much daily since around 2005. It's a great tool. It makes things really easy to keep track of, but of course you got to learn how to use it. Anything related to transaction keeping is bookkeeping because the records used to be kept in books. Now we don't use books, but what do we call it? Web keeping? I don't know. Bookkeeping is an old term, probably needs a new name for it, but right now it's still called bookkeeping. A qualified bookkeeper will at least know generally enough about the IRS rules and the court rules so that they can keep records in the right format and get them to the courts and the attorneys as needed. As the executor of an estate, you might also have to be the bookkeeper. So the next question is, do you know how to be a bookkeeper? Do you have the experience, the education? If not, you're probably going to have a rough time ahead of you. And even if you do know how to be a bookkeeper, you probably don't want to do it because being stuck in the middle between the heirs and the money is kind of a rough place to be. So my guess is you'd rather do something else, but you're just not sure how to get somebody else to do the books. If you hire a professional, somebody who's qualified to do bookkeeping for estates, who understands the rules of the courts, the IRS, has sufficient knowledge to communicate with the attorneys and trustees regarding facts related to the matter, they'll field those questions. They'll make sure the books are right. If you'd rather have somebody else do the books, or you think after hearing this that it would probably be better if somebody else was doing it, I encourage you to schedule a free consultation with us. We provide a written bookkeeping plan after your consultation which outlines the tasks which need to be done, so you benefit whether you hire us or not. And if you don't want to talk to us directly, you can also ask your lawyer to contact us. Now, one last thing to consider is the reason to hire a company like us rather than an individual. We are a bookkeeping firm with numerous bookkeepers on staff, and we're all here in Washington. Sometimes estate cases can go on for a while, and bookkeepers tend to move around, and they also sometimes get full with clients or retire and can't keep servicing everyone. With us, if the bookkeeper working on your books leaves or changes positions, you won't even have to explain your situation again or provide access to your new account records, because that's all handled in-house at no extra charge. We also offer a guarantee that your books will be right for any month. When we were your bookkeeper, we are responsible for the integrity of that data. I do hope this has been helpful for you in understanding the full scope of the challenges related to bookkeeping for estates. Be sure to download my free booklet, How to Be a Great Executor. It's already hard enough when someone dies. Why not make it easy on yourself and invest a little bit of time and energy into creating a good record-keeping system so that later everything will work out harmoniously. It's probably what the deceased would have wanted. So you could look at it as a way to honor that person's life by ensuring that the sum of their life as it relates to the things in the physical world are passed along in a way that leaves everyone feeling good. This is Russ from Sound Bookkeepers. I wish you well.